Sync. Right, okay, so if this isn't your first time coming to this channel, you may have noticed that I've not been uploading for the last couple of weeks, and that the background has changed. And if you put two and two together, you'll have realised that I've moved house. I didn't have Wi-Fi for the first couple of weeks, and that's why I've not been uploading. Okay, so with all of the media attention that vegans were getting during February, it seems that the researchers of the TV and radio shows that Joey Carbstrong did appearances on did some digging into his past and found some of the language that he used to use and used it against him in these interviews. There's also been a pretty awful clip circulating recently. It's a trailer for a BBC Three show called Britain's Most Offended, and it's genuinely one of the worst conversations I've ever seen.
It's a fad, not a movement.
It's not a fad. What is racism fad as well?
Because veganism got to do with racism.
Essentially, this is speciesism. You're
insulting and wrong.
I agree that some people find this language offensive, and I think that's why we shouldn't use words like rape, murder, Holocaust, kidnap and slavery. Or at least we shouldn't be the first ones to use them, but maybe we should hint at similarities to these things without using the words themselves. What happens in animal agriculture is awful enough anyway. We can just describe what happens instead of having to use words like these right out of the gate, which makes people put up their defenses and not want to listen. With February now behind us, it was the first time that a lot of people had heard anything wrong with dairy, and a lot of people, including dairy farmers, were pretty shocked to hear a lot of vegan activists compare certain practices within the dairy industry to rape. Like humans, cows don't always just produce milk, they produce milk for their babies, and they don't become pregnant the same way that they would in the wild. A farmer has to put on an arm-length glove and insert their hand into the cow's rectum to hold the cow's cervix in place, and then with the other arm they'll insert bull semen into the cow's vagina. A lot of farmers have said, what? You can't compare an artificial insemination to rape. And to be pedantic, it isn't the insemination that vegans are calling rape, it's the penetration. And just to highlight how wrong it is, there was a pensioner at the end of January who was caught in a field with his arm inside of a cow's rectum, masturbating with the other hand. Now this man has been banned from every farm in Britain, and yet farmers do something very similar, and it's considered outrageous to point out that when farmers do it, it almost fits the definition of rape. The only difference between what this pensioner was doing and what farmers do is what they were doing with their other hand, and mechanically they were very similar. It's just that one of these acts is institutionalized. Now everybody at some point in their life has heard the slogan, meat is murder. And whilst the legal definition doesn't cover non-human animals, the acts of killing a human and a non-human animal don't have any meaningful differences. In both cases, a life is taken by somebody who has full knowledge of what they're doing. Again, the only difference is that one of them is normalized when the victim is certain animals. I do think it's particularly unuseful to say the slogan meat is murder, because most animal eaters have heard it so many times that they'll just be able to brush it off without having to really think about what its meaning is. Weirdly enough, there is another word that's started to be used recently, which is considered more offensive, yet doesn't actually exclude non-human animals from its definition. Holocaust means destruction or slaughter on a mass scale, and does trillions of land and sea animals a year count as slaughter on a mass scale. A lot of people exclusively associate this term with the Jewish Holocaust, However, this isn't being said to demean the severity of the Jewish Holocaust, but instead to emphasize the severity of the Holocaust that animals are the victims of. When people hear the term nuclear Holocaust, they aren't normally offended by it, it just stresses the seriousness of it. Kidnap isn't a word that I think most non-vegans would understand in the context of animal agriculture, but it does actually make sense for it to be used, and because dairy necessitates cows being repeatedly pregnant, it does become particularly relevant in this context. Because humans have this pretty strange affiliation with another species' milk, long past weaning age, cows aren't allowed to feed their children because farmers can't sell any milk that a calf has drank. And so to stop the calves from drinking their mother's milk, the cow will be separated from her calf, and there are plenty of cases of mothers crying out for days after having their calves taken away from them. Now, the last word that I can think of is particularly controversial. And I know some other vegans of colour who I know find it offensive, and I'm fairly certain I understand why. But here are my thoughts about it as somebody of Caribbean descent. If you haven't clocked on yet, the word I'm going to be talking about is slavery. Now, from a purely semantic view, farm animals do nearly fit the description of being a slave. The civil relationship whereby one person has absolute power over another and claims their life, liberty, and fortune. So the only thing stopping farm animals from being slaves is that they do not have legal personhood, even though they have personalities and possess sentience. So purely semantically, slavery is a pretty well-fitting word for them. They'll understand that there's much more to consider in cases like this. Throughout history, there's been cases of people comparing black people to animals as a way to put us down, as a way to make us seem less than human. Even I myself, I've been called a dog in the past, and I have it a lot better than even my dad had it, and my dad had it a lot better than our slave ancestors had it. However, these comparisons are coming from people with deeply speciesist mindsets, and they're comparing us to others who they don't even see as worthy of any sort of consideration. The intent of this comparison is purely to put us down. Now, the context of a vegan making the comparison of farm animals to slaves is a bit different. When it's coming from somebody who is anti-speciesism, it isn't aiming to make slaves seem less than human and isn't being used to bring us down, nor is it condoning the times that others have compared people of colour to animals with the aim to bring us down. As a vegan, I don't see a cow as lesser than I am, and so I don't find the thought of being similar to one inherently offensive. If the person who made the comparison also doesn't see cows as lesser than themselves. The comparisons of animal agriculture that some vegans make to murder, rape, kidnap, Holocaust, and slavery are not to undermine the human victims of these awful things, but to instead stress the plight that farm animals face at the hands of humans because of consumers. Some people benefit from hearing these comparisons because it helps them make the connection, however, it does often offend a lot of people, and so to reiterate, I think it's pretty bad activism. So I think I'm going to leave that one there. If you agreed with me, if you disagreed with me, you can let me know in the comment section down below the video. If you're more subtle than that, leave me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. And yeah, this has been a Coli video, and I'll talk to you next time.